Hi everyone, this is Ken Feudernick, the host of Courageous Conversations about our schools. I have to say I'm really excited about the story I'm about to share with you. In some ways, it may be the most important one we've produced for this podcast. It's about how a group of school and community leaders in Middletown, Ohio, a politically and religiously diverse city in the heart of America's Rust Belt, was able to defuse a culture war that could have emerged after a very tense school board meeting took place a couple of years ago over mask mandates and the district's commitment to inclusion and equity. This is a story about the unusual steps school leaders took to avoid the kind of culture wars that have wreaked havoc in countless school districts across the country. I'm talking about the knockdown, drag-out clashes that have pitted educators, parents, and even students against one another, the kind of ugly battles that have caused dedicated educators to quit at a time when many districts are struggling to keep enough of them to begin with. I learned about Middletown in an article I came across in the Christian Science Monitor back in June of 2023. The piece was written by Courtney E. Martin and was titled "Stopping Culture Wars in Their Tracks: How One City Did It." After reading it, I immediately thought, this is a story that must be told. I want people to hear the voices of the parents, the educators, the school board members that Courtney writes about. Because the important, often counterintuitive lessons this story teaches really can be applied in virtually any setting where high conflict is taking a toll. Okay, let's begin at the beginning with Courtney Martin telling us what attracted her to the story in Middletown.
The journey for me of getting to Middletown and reporting there really started with a book I wrote called Learning in Public. That book is part memoir, part journalism, the story of trying to figure out where to send my own white kids to school and sort of confronting the history of white parents being a force for desegregation instead of integration, including in my own hometown of Oakland, California. So as I was working on that book, I sat in a lot of school board meetings. I was just completely shocked at how dysfunctional they were. And in fact, a lot of the school board meetings I sat in on were before the quote unquote culture wars of the moment. They were just over more mundane things and they were still deeply dysfunctional. So it had gotten far worse than even what I was seeing. I applied for a grant from the Greater Good Science Center on what they call intellectual humility to pursue a story on school boards. I consider myself a solutions journalist. I co-founded something called the Solutions Journalism Network with David Bornstein and Tina Rosenberg. And what that means is basically I'm always looking for how can I cover solutions as compellingly and rigorously as I do problems. So for me, the school board question was, who's doing it better? Like, is there any district in the nation that is known as a place where they can have hard conversations in a way that centers kids? And when I started to dig into Middletown, I just sort of fell in love with the dynamics, the story, the characters, and ended up focusing on Middletown. My first impression was driving from Cincinnati, which is the closest airport to Middletown. Like along the side of the road is one of the biggest Jesus sculptures I'd ever seen in my life, which is saying a lot because I grew up in Colorado Springs, Colorado, which is kind of the home of evangelical Christianity. So I've seen quite a few Jesus sculptures in my day, and I'd never seen one so large. So I think that sets a tone in a certain way. This is a fairly religious place. It's about 50,000 people in Middletown, formerly industrial. It's suffered from a lot of the things that many towns like Middletown have, a lot of economic precarity, heroin use, opioids, all of the things that we see headlines about are a part of that community. It's also a beautiful community. I mean, just a very interesting, cohesive community.
A lot of people know it from Hillbilly Elegy and J.D. Vance, and pretty much how he portrayed it is pretty much spot on. In our city, you can have, $800,000 house, and then a mile later, there's a $10,000 house. It's very diverse. My name is Rodney Muterspaw. I'm a Middletown City Council member. I was the police chief here for years. I was a 31-year police officer and detective here. I've lived in Middletown pretty much my whole life other than going away to college. Middletown's always been home to me.
My name is Michael Bailey, and I'm a lifelong resident of Middletown. Graduated from Middletown High School. worked in the steel mills for 30 years. Some people don't understand this, but Middletown was set up with all the red lines of blacks in a particular community, whites who were from the South in a particular community. And we had all these different communities, and they worked inside of the steel plant.
This city has soul. And what I say is when you find cities like ours and the ones around us that have generation after generation after generation of people living in the same houses, people here live in the same houses their great grandparents did. It's not a new city. We're not built on technology. We're built on blue collar work from back in the 1800s and 1900s.
I believe it was 2006. There was a labor dispute. And at the time, the company was named AK Steel. It's now Cleveland Cliffs. The workers were locked out, and they were locked out for over a year. And that just devastated our community. Prior to the lockout, the beautiful homes, plenty of good paying jobs. It was considered a suburb of Cincinnati, but once the lockout took place, we got hit hard. We cut back on our public safety because of lack of revenue. Heroin came into our city and just wiped it out. It's just been bad. And that's a little bit of where I think Marlon got a phrase that he used, a hashtag of Middletown Rising, because he came in as the superintendent believing that, knowing the history, what had happened to a great city, that we could rise again.
My name is Marlon Stiles. I was a proud superintendent in Middletown City School District in Southwest Ohio. Had a great 6-year superintendency, met some amazing people. We did some wonderful things for the learners in that school district. I was an outsider. I came from a different school community. I was not born and raised in Middletown, but I came there as a leader, really excited about being part of a very diverse, very rich in experience, wonderful history. It is an urban environment. It was an urban school district. We were about 6,200 students across 10 buildings, 100% free and reduced lunch, had educational partners that worked for the district, educational partners out in the community, who really just embraced this idea of unity, right? The saying was, we're all Middies. Once a Middie, always a Middie.
Marlon Stiles is roundly considered to be very charismatic. That's one of the first words a lot of people use about him. But I think what people don't always see clearly is just how profoundly strategic and energetic he is. He came into the superintendent position knowing there was some kind of disappointment and underwhelm in the community with the Middletown Public Schools. And he saw that as just this wonderful challenge he got to tackle and started doing some really strategic things right from the start. He's just very creative, very strategic, and incredibly industrious. I mean, he was a student athlete. I think he has that vibe where he just has so much energy to offer. He's incredibly positive, and it's quite authentic. It's not like a saccharine positivity. It's really sort of how he moves through the world. He was really well positioned to try to transform a culture where there was a lot of negativity, toxicity, people complaining a lot. And I think that was his real stroke of genius.
When I arrived to Middletown, had several people who mentioned this idea of the schools not doing well, the schools not thriving. It's a failing school district. So when you got on Google and you typed in Middletown, Ohio, the narrative that was present online at that particular time wasn't ideal, right? There were just stories of drug epidemics. There were stories of crime. It was the vibe online. So when I arrived to Middletown and really got a chance to meet some of the folks there immediately, I came up with this idea of we've got to give the people something to stand for, something that they can be part of, something they can be proud of. We've got to give them something that they can believe in. So we had some conversations with some folks originally. The idea of our mascot being Middies, we wanted something that represented who and what we are and what we have been and what we will be. And this idea of anything is possible is where this idea of rising really started to surface. And it really set the stage for the ability to introduce change without using the word change, the opportunity to entertain bold ideas to really transform our school district and the learner experience. This idea of rising, meaning what we're capable of and what's possible. We mashed those two things together and came up with this tag, this brand stamp of Middie Rising. The exciting part about it is it took off amazingly, better than we ever could expect. And it was just neat to see everyone become part of Middie Rising, and more importantly, a chance for them to really invest and bring it to life. It became our culture. It represented who we were.
Middie Rising has just really taken off in our district.
Middie Rising has inspired me to be better.
And what I see is it's cool to make great grades again.
The culture of Middie Rising has improved the school a lot in the past couple of years with things like school spirit and what Middletown administration has been doing in the community.
I remember in middle school when I had zero school spirit. Didn't go to any of the games. I didn't really care about school as much. But having that impact and having people that genuinely believe in me has transformed me into having school spirit and wanting to be here and wanting to do great.
Stiles had a pretty peaceful first beginning of his tenure. He was fairly beloved across lots of different demographic boundaries. And it was a hard time to lead because it was during the pandemic and there was a lot going on, obviously, in schools. But at a school board meeting shortly after the beginning of the school year, he had a flare-up of resistance, and it was largely organized around two different themes. One was masking. He had just reinstated a masking mandate after hoping he would be able to allow masking to be optional, but the COVID rates had spiked, and so responding to public health expertise, he decided to mandate masks, which, as we all know, has become a big political sort of football. Thrown into that was this, and this was a smaller thread, not as many people spoke to this, but Marlon Stiles had recorded a video.
Hi, I'm Marlon Stiles, proud superintendent at Middletown City School
explaining some of the sort of cultural context of their approach to curriculum, their approach to discipline, none of which had anything to do with critical race theory. But as we all know, that's sort of become meaningless at this point, given how people have been using the term.
Today, let's talk about valuing diversity. At Middletown City School District, we celebrate diversity across the district. We understand the value of positive relationships between educators and students and the impact it has on student learning.
But that was sort of linked in with this politicization of the masking mandate.
We commit to recruiting and retaining high-quality urban educators here in Middletown City School District. We will bring in quality professional development on how to thrive in an urban school environment.
Marlon started off here. In his first 2 or 3 years, he was a rock star. I mean, everybody loved him. I think the people who were complaining about some of the things he was doing regarding diversity and things like that, they weren't used to it. And that's not an excuse. Ignorance is not an excuse, but I just think that they weren't used to it, and they weren't used to this kind of change and this kind of leader that was more dynamic in including and involving inclusion.
At that particular point, I was in year 5 in my superintendency in Middletown City Schools. I watched so many board meetings in other school districts across the country where this inappropriate behavior was starting to surface and these false accusations were surfacing. I'd watched it happen. And I knew one thing for sure. My grandma Watson raised me, and she would always say, you just keep living, everybody's going to get a turn. And leading up until that night of August 23rd, 2021, I knew it was only a matter of time before it was our turn to deal with these reactionary politics.
Welcome, everyone, to our meeting for Monday, August 23rd.
I knew it was coming.
Would you mind standing for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America.
Prior to August 23rd, the district had received national recognition for the work we were doing. We had people from across the country convene and visit our school buildings as part of the Digital Promise League of Innovative Schools. We had a cohort of school leaders from across the country travel to our district to see what we were doing for learners from our National Superintendent's Organization, Transformational Leadership cohort. We were doing great things for kids, and the excitement was in the air. There was evidence of success. There were metrics that we were improving and really gaining ground on some of the outcomes we were seeking. All that positive vibe was happening. We had just launched our new strategic vision, our North Star, our passport to tomorrow that really put equity at the center of what we were doing. We went out on a campaign across the community, really celebrating the community's vision and the board's vision for the passport to tomorrow, and the excitement was there. And then all of a sudden, the reactionary politics showed up, and it was officially our turn.
My name is Thomas Falk. I moved to Middletown with my family in 2017. During the public comments portion of the meeting, I think everybody had 3 minutes to say their piece. We heard people criticize these mask policies. You're oppressing our children. The district's attempting to take away our freedoms. Other people got up and spoke to, critical race theory and the schools attempting to sow division and divide our students by teaching these things. There was tension in the room. You could feel the emotion in the room. There were police officers there, I think 4 or 5. This combined with, what we knew was going on throughout the country, it gave the sense that one could expect violence. And you could see that the room seemed to be divided. Right on one half of the room, there were people sitting wearing masks. The school board was wearing masks, but on the other side of the room, nobody was wearing a mask. So we were physically divided in that way. There was a person, he was the first person to get up and speak. The man's name was Mike Connor.
I would like to welcome Mike Connor to speak to us this evening regarding the mask mandate. Welcome, Mike.
Definitely, this is not my forte here. This is not what I'm suited for. I'm more suited for the battlefield. But currently, right now, at this point in time, this room, this meeting is our battlefield. Right now, what is at stake is the physical and mental health of our children.
Initially, I thought that I registered some expression of sheepishness on his face, like, okay, wow, I'm really about to get up and say this. But as he spoke, it seemed to me like his concerns, his fears were genuine. They were authentic. He felt that the school district posed a threat to the freedom of our children.
I think it is 100% wrong to force the kids to wear masks. It is not the job of the panel here to decide what is best for our children.
As people kind of voiced their fear and their anger, you could feel the temperature in the room rising, right, and feel the tension. Kent Keller II, I think he was the loudest and the angriest person in the room.
I'll invite Kent Keller II to speak if you would like.
I'm going to try to cover 2 topics in less than 3 minutes. On May 24th, 2021, at the school board meeting, Mr. Marlon Stiles said, "We are not asking our children to change the way they behave. We are asking the system that serves our children to better serve our children in ways that are meaningful for them. We are not asking our children to change the way they behave." Mr. Stiles and the school board, you cannot teach kids properly without discipline and control in the classroom. Stop teaching division, stirring up old hatred, and disciplining our kids differently based on their color. It is your job to teach all kids the approved curriculum, nothing else. This woke CRT ideology is not education. It's indoctrination. And I know you don't want to call it CRT. You'll give it whatever fancy flowery names you can to cover it up. But we all know it's CRT.
That night, I was not surprised at what was said on the microphone. It didn't bother me in any way, shape, or form that reactionary politics were picking me and the school district as a target. It did not bother me that a white portion of the community was picking me and naming me as the black superintendent as the target. What bothered me was the potential for their bad behavior to interrupt and potentially stop, disrupt, or pause everything we had worked so hard to get in place and the vision we had set for the Passport to Tomorrow to give our students in an urban environment possibilities to be successful in life. That bothered me so much that night when they took the microphone that I felt something needed to be done so that we could protect everything the community worked for in regards to that vision and the Passport to Tomorrow to give kids opportunities. The one thing I thought in my head that night as they were speaking was, how do we not become the fire? More importantly, how do we really reach out to the community to come together to really stomp the nonsense out, so we could keep the focus on what we're trying to do for kids. It wasn't about me, and it never was in the 6 years of my superintendency at Middletown City School District. It was about the fact that the community was doing everything they could to come together for the kids. And the reaction from the community, I think, proved the fact that the community was really standing behind us as a district. For me, it was a confidence that what we were doing was good for kids. And what we had done together and what we wanted to do collectively as a staff in a school district for the kids in the community and with the community, we knew it was the right thing. You know, when someone stands up and they question what you're doing and they point their finger at you and make accusations like Kent Keller did that night, you know, in my head, I was just sitting there thinking, you have no idea how much we care about this place. You have no idea what people are doing to give our students a chance to be successful.
Marlon Stiles is a guy who's probably been able to talk his way in and out of everything for most of his life, I think. So this was a really unusual experience for him to sort of realize if he kept coming back with facts, for example, about what was being claimed with CRT or about, you know, what the public health officials were saying to him with regards to masks, that was not going to diffuse the situation. That was just kind of coming back at people as gasoline on the fire, no matter what he said. And so he's kind of took a deep breath and reassessed and said, what can I do here? And he decided to ask for help.
In the next episode, you will see who Stiles called on for help, but you will also learn about the critical and unexpected move he makes that helped defuse the tensions that were mounting in the district.